from God to Cain to Seth.
When you think of strategy video games, you might be mistaken for thinking that a large prerequisite to enjoy these titles would be an unhealthy fascination with the History Channel, maybe a little bit too much facial hair and being slightly overweight. But that's not just the case. For the last 40 years or so, strategy video games have become one of the biggest forms of entertainment on the planet. Without getting into the millions of subgenres, broadly speaking there are considered to be two main types of strategy video game. Real-time, where players control events as they happen, albeit they're not really happening, they're in your computer, and turn-based, where players make decisions and actions in one turn, and then their opponent or opponents follow suit afterwards in their turn. That one's a bit like chess, just with less time spent fondling your bishop. The origins of strategy video games can be dated back to the early 1780s, where limited PC hardware meant that it was really well suited to have static images on screen. The maths could be driven by simple tables in the background, and the gameplay logic could be simple rock, paper, scissors in its nature. A great early example of this is Don Daglow's 1981 title, Utopia, for the Intellivision. It featured two islands with players competing to develop and grow their nation, combining both city building, grand strategy and real-time elements in a sort of strategy tapas, as literally no one's ever called it. As hardware became more powerful in the early 1990s, more objects could be rendered on screen. The speed and the scale of conflicts could be increased. The first real title to take advantage of this was Dune 2, Lost in New York, Westwood Studios' seminal masterpiece.
The house that produces the most spice will control Dune.
The game took place in real time. That's as long as for you real time is about 10 frames a second. Dune 2 set some RTS standards that we've seen in virtually every strategy game since, including some, all, or none of these. Resource gathering, base building, multiple factions, 20 fully licensed English Premier League football teams, over 700 cars licensed from 80 real-world manufacturers. Dune 2 was a critical success and shipped over 250,000 copies, but while it features today in many lists of the best video games of all time, to many casual gamers it's not too well known. Neither is the game that borrowed several elements and wrapped it up in a fantasy setting, 1994's Warcraft, Orcs and Humans. The title that brought strategy games to the masses appeared a year later. Some think it's the greatest real-time strategy of all time, some think it's the greatest game of all time. Yep, even better than Alien Colonial Marines. And that title? Command & Conquer.
A full frontal attack with your strongest forces should render their military center of operation.
Yes. Power shifts more quickly than some people think. I am Cain.
Westwood Studios' Dune 2 was a first attempt at bringing together several elements from other games and other genres into one game in one genre, but its follow-up would refine these and introduce the wider audience to clicking and dragging on their PC hand control device. Every aspect of Command & Conquer had been created to the absolute limit of what was possible for both budget and technology at the time. The co-founder of Westwood, Brett Sperry, once said that Command & Conquer was the net result of the Dune 2 wishlist. One of its most memorable features is its main storytelling device. FMV, or full motion articulated real moving video footage cutscenes, was used to tell the tale of the war for Tiberium between the GDI and their brother/sisterhood of Nod.
With non-resonating reversible energy that has a tendency to disrupt carbon-based molecular structures with inconsequent and unequal positrons orbiting on the first, second, and ninth quark rings.
The video cutscenes in the Command & Conquer series have become legendary and gave birth to one of the greatest video game villains of all time, Cain, who places marginally behind whoever thought up downloadable horse armour. Cain led the brother or sisterhood of Nod against GDI forces across 4 mainline games in the Tiberian universe and several spin-offs and expansions too. The gameplay in Command & Conquer allowed players to gather resources, to amass resources and use these resources to build buildings that cost resources. The challenge for many new players would be whether to build barracks to increase the size of their army, or look to build more resource harvesting facilities to aid and speed up production later in the mission. For experienced players, however, it became more about how fast you can spam the mammoth tank, and also how quickly you can mute that unit production voiceover.
Construction complete.
Alongside its FMV videos, another big thing that sticks in the memory of Command & Conquer fans is the amazing industrial music by legendary composer Frank Klepacki. Perhaps more amazing is the fact that he was still in his early 20s when most of the music was composed. With the official rights to play the music here well beyond my financial reach, let's just listen to some silence and imagine what the music would have sounded like if it were being played.
Building. Construction complete. Building. Construction complete. Building.
Resource gathering was huge in Command & Conquer, and it genuinely added a sense of risk to the player. One unit lost could take several minutes to replace. This gathering of resources and building of units was taken into a historical setting with 1997's Age of Empires. The game was set in the distant past, earlier than 1976, earlier still than 1851, and even earlier than 1547, but they're just some random dates and have zero relevance to Ensemble Studios' breakout title. Taking control of one of 12 historic civilizations, the aim was to move your settlement through from the Stone Age to the Iron Age. The development of your civilization was driven by a technology tree, or tech tree, or mechanisation shrub, if you live in certain parts of the east of England. Rather than building new structures to unlock new units as was seen in Command & Conquer, the player would be faced with a choice of what technologies to research. Some would unlock military units, such as cavalry, army-issued coffee mug or grenade-launching cable car, while others would unlock civilian technologies, such as mining, fishing ships, fish and chips, and the production of those small plastic clips that hold your train to the seat in front on an airplane. The game was a huge commercial success and sold well in excess of 2 million units by 2001, with many more copies sold of its various remasters and spin-offs. It's worth noting that over 150,000 of these copies were sold in Korea alone. Normally, the thought of Koreans relaxing by enjoying a powerful military display set on wiping out the rest of the world would immediately make you think of our friends in the north. However, just a few miles away in South Korea, the strategy genre of video games is a national pastime for many. There is one strategy title, however, that has moved away from being just a video game in South Korea and is seen by many to be a real sport. Just like darts or crown bowls or tiddlywinks, only nobody moves, nobody blinks, and the fans don't eat tinned hot dogs at half time.
Yes, sir? Right away, sir. Orders received. Affirmative.
This game, of course, is Minecraft. StarCraft. Thousands regularly pack arenas to watch some of the greatest esports coverage of the best players, often competing for prizes running into the millions, sometimes even thousands. The game began its life after Blizzard Entertainment had wrapped up the sequel to the previously mentioned Warcraft Orcs and Humans, which was titled Warcraft 2, The Craft and the Furious. While technical changes and Diablo had delayed the release of StarCraft, the game finally appeared in 1998 and became the new benchmark for competitive strategy games. StarCraft attracted a brand new generation of video game lovers through its amazing graphics and technical prowess. However, those that came for the graphics would certainly stay for the gameplay. Constantly balanced and refined through patches and tweaks, the game's factions are perfectly balanced against one another, and certainly rewards players for taking the time to learn build orders. For the uninitiated amongst us, build orders are essentially a well-rehearsed set of actions to perform at the start of a new match that seem to be the most efficient way of gaining an advantage in any given scenario. One such notable StarCraft build order is the Connect Cry 19 build, whereby as soon as you connect to the game and realise how good the other players are, you immediately unplug your computer, hide under your desk and cry, thinking about the 19 days you've lost to try and learn the keyboard shortcuts. Fans had to wait 12 years for the eventual sequel due to internal politics and how successful World of Warcraft had become. However, when StarCraft 2 was released, it was released to a global audience. Platforms such as YouTube enabled people to share gameplay clips, and later, Twitch meant that people could stream the hell out of it for sweet, sweet profit. While strategy games can now be fast, action-packed and require strong fingering skills, one series has continued to offer a more relaxed style of gameplay. If you like your strategy games slower and more methodical, and you just can't resist one more turn, then there's a good chance that you've played Dietmar Osterhausen's historic world-building simulation turn-based strategy game. But after his infamous lawsuit, kidnapping and police shootout, the series is now only available for purchase in Argentina and Papua New Guinea. So, for those craving this type of game, the next best thing that we could find is Sid Meier's Civilisation. Spelt with an S. Civilisation has spanned 6 mainline titles, including Civ V, Civ IV, Civ II and Civ III, plus several sister and spin-off titles too. For many, Civ IV is considered to be the perfect sweet spot between hardcore 4X gameplay and technical achievement. The aim is to take a historic ruler from the last few thousand years and, starting with just one settler, build an empire to last the ages. The series was first launched in 1991 with Civilization 1, although at the time it was called Civilization, as Civilization 2 wasn't released until 1995, and that hadn't happened yet. The game sits in the 4X subgenre of strategy games, not to be confused with 4X or 4 eggs. The 4X stands for the game's 4 main pillars or objectives: explore, expand, exploit, and Excel spreadsheet. The series has sold 40 million copies worldwide, which accounts for 1 copy sold for every person in a group of 40 million people. The race to match its consistent quality is still hard fought to this day, but shows no signs of losing its appeal with both long-term series veterans and newcomers alike. While a Civilization campaign can span several thousand years, other games use a more tightly choreographed slice of history. Sweden's Paradox Interactive, for example, have over the last 20 years become the unofficial kings of grand strategy. They built a reputation for producing very, very complex games with very complex systems, with very, very, very complex DLC store pages. Outside of the huge success of City Skylines, they are perhaps best known for 5 core grand strategy titles that were also developed by their in-house team. In Europa Universalis, you take on the role of a nation using politics and trade to build an empire and dominate on the world stage. In Crusader Kings, you take on the role of a person using politics and religion to build a dynasty and dominate on the world stage. In Hearts of Iron, you take on the role of a nation using politics and tanks to build an empire and dominate on the world stage. And in a huge departure, in Stellaris, you take on the role of a species, using politics and trade to build an empire and dominate on the galactic stage. I wonder what their Victoria series is about. The strategy genre has changed massively over the last 40 years in many ways that we can't be bothered to be specific about. Yet in other ways that we also can't be bothered to be specific about, it's hardly changed at all. The fundamentals that made it fresh and new and exciting in the 1980s are still found in many titles today. Titles such as Age of Empires and Company of Heroes have proven that both strong sales and critical acclaim can coexist. The Anno series highlights the power of settling on a niche and refining it over a number of years. While the Command & Conquer franchise has shown that sometimes, even if you do strike gold, in the long term you can still flood the mine, kill the miners and tell their families to f*** off. Where strategy video games go from here is a really exciting prospect. Smaller development studios can now bring innovative experiences to the market due to better game engines and better technology. The heavy hitters now also know that strategy can definitely be a bankable genre to work in. Who knows, that next piece of innovation is probably just around the corner and we can welcome a whole new batch of players who love to point and click and buy copious amounts of DLC.